I dropped my keys into the bowl by the door, kicked off my shoes, and walked straight toward the kitchen. My back ached from the 12 hours before sunrise and the 24 that followed, shifts that blur your sense of time until your body becomes a clock you stop checking. I wasn't hungry exactly, just hollow, a yogurt and some quiet. That was all I needed. But there was something new in the room, a second fridge, silver, shiny, humming like it had been there forever. I blinked, thinking maybe the exhaustion was messing with me. The kitchen light flickered above it as I opened the main fridge. Inside, every single item was labeled in bold black marker. Chelsea on the milk, the butter, even the leftover chicken I'd made 2 nights ago. My hand hovered over a small container, peach yogurt, the kind I always bought for myself. "That one's mine," Chelsea's voice cut in behind me. I turned. She was standing there with a mug in her hand, her hair still damp from a shower, fresh-faced, rested. "You should get your own stuff. From now on, we're keeping things separate." I looked at the yogurt again, then back at her. My hand hadn't moved. Trevor walked in behind her. His eyes met mine, then slid to the floor. Not a word. My legs wanted to sit, but the chair was already pulled out. Someone else had been there recently. I let go of the fridge door. The soft thud as it shut echoed far too loud in that small space. Chelsea walked past me, opened the new fridge, and placed her mug inside like she was tucking in a child. Everything in it was pristine, shelves wiped down, rows of glass containers, a second home in the heart of mine. I turned away. I didn't want them to see my hands shaking or the sting building behind my eyes. I reached for my bag, still slung over one shoulder, and stepped toward the stairs without a word. The grocery receipt was still in the side pocket, folded neat from 3 days ago. I didn't sleep that night. My legs ached, but it wasn't the kind of tired you could fix with rest. It was the kind that settled deep in your chest and made your own home feel like a hotel where you weren't welcome. This house didn't come easy. I bought it when Trevor was 6, right after his father passed. I remember signing the closing papers in my scrubs, trying to hide the pen tremble from a 12-hour shift at the pediatric ward. For years, it was just the two of us. We didn't have much, but the roof never leaked, and the water always ran hot. I worked nights and weekends, holidays, even back-to-back doubles when he started college. It was easier to miss Christmas if you were helping someone else's baby survive the night. Trevor called last year, said he needed a place to land for a little while, just until things settled. Chelsea had been laid off, and he was between contracts. I didn't ask questions. I made up the guest room, cleared a drawer for her, stocked the fridge with almond milk, because I remembered she was lactose intolerant. 14 months. I told myself it was fine when they brought in a new couch, even though it clashed with everything I already had. I said nothing when they boxed up my serving dishes and replaced them with modern ones that looked like hotel decor. I kept cooking, folding their laundry, even fixing the loose tile in their bathroom one afternoon while they were out. But now the spice rack was theirs. Chelsea moved it above the second fridge and filled it with things I'd never used. Jarred turmeric blends, imported salts, and something called za'atar. My own paprika was gone. No one told me they'd reorganize the cabinets. Tonight, I stood in the hallway holding my grocery receipt, wondering when it stopped being my kitchen. Not that it mattered, I wasn't hungry anymore. I left the lights off as I walked back downstairs. There was laundry in the dryer. I folded it, quiet and careful, and carried the stack toward their room. Dinner used to be the hour we shared by default, not by invitation. Even after shifts that hollowed me out, I'd still set 3 plates. Habit, muscle memory, love misfiled as routine. But tonight, the table already had 2. Chelsea plated steak in perfect slices, edges glistening with butter. Beside it, roasted vegetables arranged like something photographed rather than eaten. The smell was intentional, bold enough to pull you in even when you shouldn't come close. I opened the microwave quietly. Inside sat the bowl I'd warmed for myself. Rice, chicken pulled from a container I'd bought 2 nights ago before any labels existed. The timer beep was too loud in the pause between Trevor cutting his first bite and me taking mine. I lowered myself into the chair anyway. My fork clicked porcelain. Chelsea looked up as if noticing me for the first time and frowned, small, almost polite. "Oh," she said. casual as a feather landing. "I didn't know if you'd be eating with us. No, we saved you a plate." No warmth, not even pity, just the suggestion that me sitting there was a polite misunderstanding. Trevor kept eating, eyes on his plate like gravity demanded it. The only sound was chewing, measured, rhythmic, comfortable in a home that was no longer mine to be comfortable in. "I'm good," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Even my throat almost believed it. The silence that followed wasn't awkward for them, only for me. My food wasn't cold, yet it carried that brittle taste of leftovers warmed twice. Not from temperature, but context. Once I finished, I stacked my dish, rinsed it, and placed it beside the sink, careful not to crowd their space. My purse lay on the counter, unzipped from earlier. The corner of a receipt peeked out, Wednesday's groceries, down to the apples. Trevor liked the creamer. Chelsea preferred the cereal no one else ate. Upstairs, I shut my door with the softness of someone practiced at taking up less room. The house didn't feel loud until it felt quiet again, and I sat on the edge of the bed, holding the receipt between two fingers, realizing I hadn't just been shopping for food. I'd been proof that I still belonged here. But belonging, it turned out, was the one item they'd never let me purchase, no matter what aisle I looked in, and I felt its absence most sharply when the lights downstairs clicked off. The sun was barely up when the washing machine chimed its little mechanical hymn. I remember thinking how polite it sounded, like it was trying not to disturb anyone, while I carried the warm laundry against my chest. A stack of towels balanced like a practiced routine. Their towels. The hallway was quiet enough to carry voices without trying. Chelsea's voice slid through first, low, coated in amusement. "If she won't move out, we'll just make her want to." A pause, a small laugh. Contained, intentional, the kind that suggests strategy, not humor. Then Trevor. "Yeah, we'll freeze her out. She's not going to fight us." I stopped breathing. Not dramatically, not in a way a movie would show, just the quiet, involuntary suspension of a body realizing it has walked into the center of something it wasn't meant to witness. The basket in my arms was still warm. My fingers tightened around the folded fabric. "She thinks she still runs the place," Chelsea continued. "Let her live upstairs like a guest. She'll give up eventually." There it was. The sentence didn't stab. It rearranged. I took one step back, then another. The floorboards didn't betray me. Years of late-night shifts taught me how to move without leaving evidence. I climbed the stairs, holding their towels like a peace offering no one intended to accept. My bedroom door clicked shut on a breath, not a protest. I set the basket down gently, as if noise might make the moment more real. My pulse thudded in my ears. Not heartbreak, not exactly, Belle, more like a system reboot. Slow and irreversible. A guest. They said it like the most generous thing in the world, to let me sleep in a house my name still anchored legally, historically, physically. I sat on the edge of the bed, quiet still, and oddly detached from the shake in my hands. My body understood the betrayal before my mind built language for it. Out there, they were planning the temperature of my place in the home. Cold, unwelcoming, temporary. I reached for the drawer by the nightstand, the one they'd never touched, never opened, never considered relevant, and hooked my thumb under the small brass key taped beneath it. The drawer opened without protest, though it had every right to complain after being ignored for so long. Inside was an accordion folder, faded at the edges, worn from years of moving apartments, night shifts, and life in motion long before this house ever existed. I untied the string, and the past arranged itself into evidence, receipts stacked by category, every mortgage payment I ever made highlighted. Property tax records, insurance papers, the house deed, my name sitting there in crisp ink like a signature of permanence. Then the bank documents for the joint checking account I had opened when Trevor was 20, back when joint meant trust rather than access. They thought they were sliding me toward the edges, pixel by pixel. They had mistaken my quiet for absence, my tolerance for vacancy. I pulled out my laptop from the bottom of the wardrobe. It was old but capable, like me. The flash drive connected with a soft click that felt louder than the morning Chelsea was born into my kitchen, with ambition and no gentleness. I scanned documents one after another, watching pages convert into digital files, stacking into neat rows named facts, proof, ownership, accountability. No tears, not now. Paperwork demands dry eyes and steady hands. I reviewed every line as if grading an exam. The mortgage had never been late, not once, even after the double shifts, even after grief, even after Trevor's career dipped, stalled, and stalled again. Their comfort was purchased by my discipline, signed with my exhaustion. For the first time in weeks, my breathing came without calculation. They assumed I was shrinking. I was simply gathering. When I closed the laptop, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt awake, the kind of awake that comes after a long illness or a long denial, the soft exhaustion of someone who has finally accepted the shape of a truth. I placed the flash drive into a small tin box behind the emergency sewing kit, another object no one ever opened, another silence misunderstood as emptiness. That night I slid under the blankets without rehearsing tomorrow. Rest found me without an argument for the first time in longer than I'd acknowledged, because planning had started without a title, without an announcement, and without a sound. I started with the mugs, the yellow one with the tiny crack near the handle, the chipped floral saucer set I got on clearance, the heavy mixing bowls from that warehouse sale 2 summers ago. One by one, I wrapped them in old dish towels, stacked them neatly in boxes, and labeled them with a single word: donated. The plates, the knives, the non-stick pans, all mine. The kettle, the measuring spoons, the blender, mine. Even the tea towels hanging by the oven, the ones Chelsea rolled her eyes at for being dated, were folded and packed with care. She thought her minimalism made her modern. She never once asked who stocked the kitchen before she arrived with her curated spices and rigid rules. By midday, the counters were bare, the spice rack empty, the utensils gone. I left their fridge untouched, of course, but I cleared out the shared one: milk, eggs, bread, yogurt, even the leftover lasagna I'd made and hadn't eaten, boxed, labeled, stored away. I didn't slam anything. I didn't break anything. I just made space. Then I drove to the bank and had the joint card canceled. Not frozen, canceled. Trevor could open a new one if he wanted. He was grown. Back home, I opened the pantry, cleared my things, and clicked the padlock shut. Not because I expected them to steal, but because I wanted them to pause, to reach for something and find a boundary instead. It wasn't rage. It wasn't pettiness. It was the sound of a line being drawn. Chelsea's voice came sharp and immediate when she found the padlock. "Are you kidding me?" I walked past her. No words, no nod, no apology. She followed me down the hall, but I didn't turn. I didn't flinch. Later that evening, I heard the sound of cupboard doors opening and closing over and over. A drawer slamming, then silence. A silence too deep to be defeat. It was recognition. Her kitchen had vanished without a fight, and mine had quietly returned. The knock came at dusk, hesitant. Not the kind that demands attention, just enough to suggest guilt on the other side of the wood. I opened the door to find Trevor standing there, arms limp at his sides, face drawn like he hadn't slept in days. Maybe he hadn't. "We didn't mean it like that," he said. His voice cracked halfway through. "We just thought we'd be more independent if we took over some of the space." I didn't answer right away. I let the silence widen until it settled between us like fog. "Chelsea's upset," he added, like that would matter more than what had already been said and done. I stepped back, picked up the envelope I'd placed on my dresser earlier that morning, and handed it to him. It was printed on plain paper, no letterhead, no fanfare, just facts. Notice to vacate. 7 days. If they weren't out by then, I'd begin formal eviction. Legal, clean, unemotional. Trevor stared at the paper like it was written in a language he hadn't studied. "You're serious?" "I am," I said, my tone even. 7 days. His face changed then, not angry, not wounded, just lost. "She won't have anywhere to go," he said. "She had somewhere," I replied, when she made room for a second fridge. His lips parted, but no sound followed. Behind him, I could hear Chelsea's footsteps, then her voice, sharp, cracking at the edges. "She can't do this!" I didn't look at her. "Which one of you paid the gas bill last month?" I asked, my voice calm. They both froze. "The electric? The property taxes? The internet you've been using to apply for jobs?" Trevor swallowed. I nodded slowly. "I thought so." Chelsea's eyes brimmed, but I offered no softness this time. Just the quiet dignity of someone whose line had finally held. They walked away together, but not in sync. No hand-holding, no plan, just footsteps that didn't know where to land. I closed the door gently behind them, then turned back to the living room, mine again in silence, and sat at the table for the first time in weeks without needing to earn the right to be there. Chelsea left 2 days before the deadline. She didn't say goodbye, just slammed the door hard enough to rattle the hallway mirror and left black scuff marks on the porch. She never helped sweep. I didn't watch her go. I listened. That was enough. Trevor stayed longer. He didn't argue, didn't protest, just started doing what he should have done months ago. He applied for work. I saw the tab open on the shared laptop before he closed it too quickly. He left a check on the kitchen counter. Partial repayment for utilities, groceries, everything. The memo line said it all. I deposited it silently. He started texting updates, short, awkward sentences. Got an interview. Got the offer. Start Monday. I never replied, but I read every word. Some nights he'd leave the dishes clean without being asked. Other nights he'd be gone before I came downstairs, leaving the house quiet in a way that didn't feel tense anymore, just empty in a manageable sort of way. Then one morning, I found a small envelope slid under my bedroom door. No stamp, no name on the outside. Inside was a photo. Trevor and me, his high school graduation. He looked younger, sunburned, tired from the heat, but proud. I remembered that day. I'd worked a night shift and still made it to the ceremony with seconds to spare. My smile in the picture was uneven, rushed. His arm around me was casual, not yet distant. There was a folded note beneath it. Short, apologetic, written in his slanted, hurried script. I was ungrateful. I'm sorry, I see it now, I know that's late. No, I didn't cry. I didn't forgive. I put the photo on the edge of my dresser, tucked halfway behind an old candle jar. The note went through the shredder that afternoon. Some words don't need to be kept. They need to be heard, then released. That evening, the spare bedroom was finally empty. I stripped the sheets, opened the windows, and let the breeze pass through. It smelled like lemon soap and quiet. The house felt cleaner, not healed, but honest. The morning after Trevor left, the kitchen was still. Not the kind of still that comes from absence, but the kind that returns after too much noise has finally worn itself out. I opened the curtains. Light came in unfiltered, as if even the sun had been waiting for someone to move the weight from the air. The second fridge was gone. The corner where it stood looked larger than I remembered. The counters were clean, not just in surface, but in feeling. No more taped labels, no more measuring glances, no more hesitation before reaching for something that used to be mine. I pulled out flour, yeast, salt. The motions came back like muscle memory, old comfort and new silence. I hadn't baked bread in months. There hadn't been space for it, not on the counters, not in the schedule, not in the air. I mixed by hand, let it rise, pressed it down, gently folded it, shaped it. The oven warmed slowly, patient, like everything else in the house. When the crust began to brown, the kitchen filled with that familiar smell. Warm, clean, alive. I didn't wait for anyone. I sliced a piece while it was still steaming and sat at the table with the radio humming something soft and forgettable. For the first time in a long while, I pulled my chair back just slightly. Not to guard my space, but because I could. I ate slowly, letting each bite settle. No voices argued across the hall. No footsteps stomped above. No refrigerator door slammed out of sync with mine. Just me and the sound of a fridge humming evenly, its shelves filled with what I chose, when I chose it. I thought of all the dinners I'd eaten in silence lately and realized this wasn't the same kind. This silence didn't make me smaller. It made room. When I stood to clean up, I didn't rush. I let the music finish, let the dishwater cool in the sink, let the piece stretch longer than it had any right to. Then I made my way upstairs, where a room waited to be opened. The key stuck a little in the lock, like the door had grown used to being forgotten. I jiggled it once, gently, and the knob turned with a soft sigh. The room was smaller than I remembered, but maybe that's just what happens when a space hasn't been used for living in a while. Dust curled at the windowsill. My old sewing table sat beneath the covered window like a stage without lights. I pulled the sheet off and folded it carefully. Even though no one would see, the machine still worked. The pedal stuck for a second before clicking into motion, the motor humming like it had waited patiently for my return. I ran my hand over the fabric scraps in the drawer. Faded cotton, half-started quilt blocks, a pinwheel square I never finished. They still held the shape of my hands. It was strange how easy it was to fall back into something that once gave you rhythm. I threaded the needle and stitched a simple line through a leftover piece of muslin. The sound filled the room in a way silence couldn't. Downstairs, the house was still. No second fridge humming like a challenge. No slammed doors. No whispered strategy meetings in the hallway. I didn't feel triumphant. This wasn't victory. It wasn't even revenge. It was something quieter, sharper, like clarity. Not everyone who asks for shelter wants a home. Some want control, dressed as need, and some think kindness is weakness until they find the door shut behind them. I opened the blinds. Morning sun spilled across the floor in soft gold. The light didn't apologize for being bright. It just was. I sat there a long time, not sewing, not moving, just listening to the way the house breathed when no one else was pushing against its walls. It wasn't freedom I felt. It was something steadier, something earned. There are lines we draw in pencil when we hope not to need them, and lines we carve in ink when they've already been crossed.